She was the Demon King's favorite queen, but somehow, she fell head over heels for a human guy. And, get this, in broad daylight, right in front of the Demon King, she totally gave him a green hat. Yeah, if you know what I mean, she cheated on him. But not long ago, she used to see humans as nothing more than ants. The number of heroes who die by her hands, too many to count. Meanwhile, I'm just a level F hero, barely scraping by with Belle, a level D hero. Now, because the queen stretched in this oh-so-adorable way, I ended up with a bloody nose and whoops gave away my position. Of course, the monsters caught wind of it and tipped off the queen. Next thing I know, she's leading a monster army straight at me, ready to chop off my head and gift it to the Demon King. But, nope, I'm not backing down. Instead, I hit up my system. The system locks on to the queen as the target, and bam, it activates inside the Demon King. Right then, the queen's massive hand grabbed my head. She leaned in, her little cherry red lips coming closer. But wait, instead of chomping me to death, she kissed me. Yeah, you heard me. Kissed me. And guess what? After that, the system gave me plus 100 attack. Not bad, right? But the queen's monsters were all what is happening here. Just then, another monster tried to attack from behind. I blocked it with my broken sword, then slipped away from the queen. The moment our lips parted, the queen snapped back to reality for a second. I wiped the saliva from my mouth and moved toward Belle. Inside, the queen's heart was pounding. What the heck just happened? She was supposed to kill me, not kiss me. Is this human guy playing mind games or something? She quickly pushed down her 15% chaos level and thought, gotta keep this a secret from the Demon King. Then, she ordered her monsters to kill him and destroy the body. The monsters were ruthless. One swung an axe, cutting my sword in half, and another brought down a giant axe straight for my head. But I dodged just in time. My defense was still 0, but my attack, plus 100 points, baby. I swung the broken sword back, and wham, I chopped the giant axe in half. But just as I thought I had the upper hand, a sneaky monster came at me from behind. Of course, I noticed, turned, and blasted him away with a single strike. But then, boom, here comes the queen, jumping on top of me and kicking me down. She really packed a punch. I was pinned under her, unable to move, and the monsters were about to finish me off, that is, until the queen smacked one of them away with her tail. She growled at them. Nobody touch him. Anyone who disobeys gets killed. Then, she licked her lips and said to me, I'll take care of this human myself. Her chaos level was at 90 now. She was all set to bite me to death. But, instead of going for my throat or my head, she started licking my ear. Yeah, I know, it's weird. She was feeling super grossed out by it, but her body just wouldn't stop. And me, I was stuck under her, in extreme pain. But hey, my stats were going up. It was time for a counterattack, but as soon as I grabbed my broken sword, her tail wrapped around me. She felt the danger, broke free of the system's hold, and grabbed my throat, pinning me to the ground. Right when she was about to finish me off, something strange happened again. She reached down to feel my armor seriously and got this lustful look on her face. She actually wanted to tear my armor off. Next thing I knew, she just shattered my entire suit of armor with a bang. And guess what? She was thinking, I wonder what human men are like. How different could they be from the Demon King? With that, she threw herself on top of me, closed her eyes, and started leaning in. Me. Well, I wasn't about to just sit there, so I wrapped my arms around her head. But just at that moment, a man slowly walked up. As he got closer, he saw his beloved queen, sitting on top of a completely naked man. Instantly, he felt insulted, his back hunched, and his sword dropped to the ground. Gently, the Demon King was deeply hurt inside. And when the system sensed his critical hit, it doubled my stats and leveled me up, but not far away. The Demon King was glowing green with rage, ready to kill me on the spot. Yet, the queen wouldn't even get off me. She looked at the Demon King and said, It's not what you think. Let me explain. But she immediately shifted the blame to him, saying it was because he was too late that she did it. The Demon King, glowing green, froze, but the queen wasn't done. She went on to question why he allowed her to fall into temptation again. Thinking it was his fault, she even asked, Where were you when I needed you? The Demon King, completely beaten, immediately turned into a loyal puppy. rushing to apologize and explain why he was late. This made the surrounding monsters exchange awkward glances, realizing they were still far from the Demon King's level. On the other side, I decided to take advantage of the situation. While the Demon King was comforting the Queen, I quickly started to sneak away from these high-level monsters. So, as the Demon King calmed his Queen, I casually helped the injured Bella and started walking off. Meanwhile, the Demon King continued his rant, "It's all humans' fault." The Queen dramatically clutched her head and cried. Our pure love almost got stained. Hearing that, the Demon King's green glow flared up again. "Don't worry, my love, I'll kill him for you. You won't feel pain, will you?" But the Queen quickly grabbed the Demon King's leg. "I love you. How could I ever fall for another man?" At this point, the Demon King realized we were getting further away. He immediately ordered his monsters to stop me and Belle. But the monsters just stood there, unmoving. The Queen said we can't interfere. So, the Demon King had to handle it himself. With a single strike, he hit the rocks in our path, then instantly appeared in front of me, ready to take down the human who dared tempt his Queen. But with my increased defense, I didn't die. I was knocked into the Queen's arms. The Demon King's speed and attack power were insane. One blow shattered a few of my ribs, and before I could recover, he attacked again. Ready to cut me in half, I was on the brink of death, but I had no choice but to lock onto the Queen with the system. Just then, a delicate hand appeared on the battlefield, and slapped the Demon King right across the face, accompanied by a simple, "Don't hurt him." The Demon King, who thought he was about to finish me off, froze. He looked at the Queen in disbelief and asked, "Why?" Meanwhile, I quickly seized the chance to escape. The wounded Demon King covered his face, crying, but the Queen only had eyes for me. The system detected the Demon King's critical hit and leveled me up again. But the Queen couldn't help herself. She was desperate to claim my body, while the Demon King held on to her hand. "Don't go, love. You said I was your one true love." But the Queen, now consumed by desire, shoved him away and rushed towards me, determined. "I can't resist. I need this." She pounced on me, knocking me to the ground, and clung to me tightly, ignoring the Demon King behind her. Her entire mind and body focused on me. I could only open my mouth and let her do as she pleased. Absorbing energy from her, the Demon King kept muttering to himself, "It's my fault. I need to kill him, to bring her back." But the Queen didn't give him a second glance. She bared her teeth at him, and told him not to interfere. The Demon King, thinking it was his fault, broke down mentally, and his faith shattered. But even then, the Queen didn't look at him. She remained fixated on me, draining energy non-stop. Though I could feel I wasn't myself anymore, I couldn't deny the joy that bubbled inside me. Meanwhile, the broken king of demons, Bentley, watched his beloved Queen tremble. The system immediately notified me that Bentley had hit rock bottom, his level boosted by 5, but right now, the Demon King didn't care about his Queen anymore. His eyes were set on destroying everyone in sight. With a furious roar, he swung his green longsword towards the still-heaving Queen. But then, the Queen suddenly looked up, her seductive face turning towards him. To everyone's surprise, Bentley's sword stopped just 2.5 centimeters away from her. Even now, despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to strike. His heart still burned with love for her, but he'd already lost the will to live. Instead, he began to gather his energy for a self-destruct. But, in the blast radius, Della and I were caught in their emotional mess. That's when I noticed my level had shot up to 10, thanks to Bentley's energy surge, unlocking the instant-slash skill. Seizing the chance, I slashed and beheaded Bentley, watching as his body collapsed in front of me. The self-destruct sequence he'd triggered froze. But when the Queen looked at his lifeless body, she felt it wasn't strong enough. Wasn't this the second time this had happened? Before she could finish the thought, Bentley's headless body leapt towards her and wrapped her in a tight embrace, declaring he'd fulfill his promise to die together with her. No way. His lingering consciousness wanted to explode again. Just when I thought the Queen had finally escaped, she screamed, tears filling her eyes, shouting for help. At that moment, a hand grabbed her arm and pulled her from Bentley's grasp. Bentley's body began to glow white, his remaining consciousness still attempting to reach out for her. "Eugene!" The Queen screamed his name, but the next second, A massive shockwave erupted from Bentley's body, obliterating everything in the underground city around us. We were sent flying to the bottom of the dungeon. As the shockwave dissipated, I opened my eyes to find a pink lizard perched on top of me. It was the true form of the demon beast Eugene, the shiny lizard, still clinging to me. Meanwhile, Belle finally woke up amidst the chaos, asking me where I was. Just then, I received my reward for defeating the Demon King, the full map of the underground city. I looked up, and blood rushed from my nose at the sight. Should I accept the map? Luckily, Belle noticed me at that moment and hurried to break the awkward tension between us. I then opened the map, which detailed all the rooms, traps, resources, and bosses. With the map's markings, we could find the boss rooms directly. Belle, still confused, leaned over and asked, "What did you see?" Apparently, the system only allowed me to see the map, so I answered, "Nothing much," and prepared to leave, but just at that moment, my heart suddenly thumped wildly in my chest. Before I knew it, I collapsed to the ground. Coughing up blood, my veins were bulging on my arm, and my pinky finger started cracking. The pain hit me so hard, I screamed, clutching my finger. But no matter how hard I squeezed, it didn't help. My pinky was slowly melting away, the pain shot through me like 1,000 knives, and I rolled around on the ground in agony. Belle, standing behind me, had no idea what was going on. Seeing me roll around, in pain with blood pouring from my back, she quickly rushed to hold me, trying to ease my suffering with her embrace. But it barely did anything. By the time it was over, my pinky had melted down to just a little knout. It took what felt like forever before I could sit up from Belle's arms, and told her I was fine. That's when Belle asked what had happened to my body, why it was suddenly melting. I told her I was poisoned 6 months ago, when the monsters attacked the city. A group of them surrounded a guild warrior. They seemed to want the box the warrior was holding onto for dear life. But during the fight, the box got cracked open, releasing a burst of energy, slightly weaker than the explosion from the Demon King earlier. I was lucky to survive that, but I was knocked into a crack in the ruins. However, that was when the box released a blood-like substance, and then, blood rain started falling from the sky. The warrior holding the box began to melt. The monster that tried to steal the box melted too, the moment it got hit by the blood rain. I didn't touch the blood directly from where I was hiding in the rubble, but I could smell it and I still got poisoned. When I woke up, I was in a hospital. The doctor told me I only had 1 year left to live, but just then, a glowing screen appeared in front of me, with a message that said Demon God's blood can cure the poison. The screen then asked if I wanted to bind the system and become a player to obtain the Demon God's blood. Without hesitation, I chose yes. I was immediately informed that the Demon God's blood was located in the underground dungeon that night. I had no idea the system could be so useful. Not only could it detect the color of people's underwear, but it could also help me navigate through a trap-filled maze, allowing me to avoid danger with every step. While Belle and I were heading to find the boss, the main raiding team had also arrived at the dungeon. Their every step was filled with dread, as one wrong move could trigger a trap and lead to instant death. The team leader, Harris, was indifferent to the deaths of his teammates. He ordered the lowest level player to go first and find the right path. So, D-rank hero Marquis was pushed forward. Harris unsheathed his blade and threatened, "You're leading the way. Find us the correct route." The vice captain, Jerome, didn't want to see more deaths and quickly pulled out a little gadget, suggesting they could use it to scout the way. But in the blink of an eye, Harris cleaved Tyrone in half with his blade. Turning to Tyrone's lifeless body, Harris growled, "Don't you ever pull out that useless junk again, or I'll kill you next." The difference between B-rank Tyrone and A-rank Harris was so vast that Tyrone could only lower his head in defeat. Under the watchful eyes of the entire raiding team, Marquis stepped forward, trembling. But before he could take more than a few steps, a laser-like sword shot from the ground and pierced him, killing him instantly. The team behind him gasped in horror. Were the traps here random? But it was too late for them to mourn their fallen teammate. Harris, like a grim reaper, continued barking orders. Just then, a door at the far end of the room opened, and a head popped out. The raiding team stared at me and Belle in confusion. "How are the bait team still alive and here?" Harris glared at me with malice and hissed, "How the hell did you make it here, you monster?" To explain why Harris hated me so much, let's rewind to yesterday. He was furious, pointing at me and asking, "How do you know the color of my wife's underwear?" I told him I trained myself to sense the colors of things around me in preparation for tomorrow's battle. But Harris didn't believe me and demanded to know what my relationship was with his wife, Shukeen. To prove myself, I decided to demonstrate. I started pointing out the colors of their underwear. The left pair is couple-themed. Harris, yours is pink, and the guy on the right isn't wearing any. The guy on the right didn't try to stop Harris after hearing this and agreed that I should be killed on the spot. But another member spoke up, saying it would cause unnecessary trouble to kill me now. In the end, they decided to put me in the bait team, thinking I would die without them lifting a finger. What they didn't expect was that I survived under the Demon King's hands. Now, Harris was standing tall, pointing at me and ordering me to step forward. I knew he wanted me to scout the path for him, but with his authority, I couldn't refuse. On the other side, Jerome quickly caught on to Harris's plan. He said, "If we follow our route, we can avoid the traps," but Harris just looked at Jerome with disdain. The raid team had already lost over 10 members getting here, and there was no time to turn back. "I'm thinking about the team," Harris said. "If you don't want him to lead, then you take the lead." Then, he turned to me and said, "It's your turn to contribute to the team. Don't even think about defying orders. You know what the consequences are." I just gave a casual okay and opened up the map rewarded by the system. Belle immediately grabbed my arm, trying to stop me. "This path clearly has problems. The captain ordered me to go," I said. "Don't worry, I'll be fine." Without hesitation, I took the first step. Completely calm. Thanks to my full map view, the raid team was shocked. They had already lost many scouts trying to navigate this path, but here I was, just an F-rank hero, making it through safely and reaching them without a single mistake or triggering any traps. They all thought I was relying on some kind of intuition. I shamelessly told Harris, "This is the result of my training, and as for your wife, there's nothing going on between us." Even so, Harris still didn't believe me. "That was just luck," he grumbled. "From now on, you're leading the way." But when I led the team to the treasure room, Harris secretly attacked me. He slashed at a stone above my head, intending to make it look like a trap had triggered and killed me. At that moment, a giant crab claw appeared out of thin air, blocking and smashing the stone above. The claw struck Harris, the rank hero, but fortunately, he blocked most of the damage with his sword. Then, a monster emerged from below, and that crab claw was actually its tail. Its appearance triggered a trap, and countless stones began to fall from above. I was soon trapped on one side of the room by the falling rocks. Just then, a voice echoed from behind me. "Why is there still a human here?" I turned around but saw no one in the depths of the shadows. From the darkness, a figure looked at me with disgust, saying, "Humans are so disgusting." Though I could hear her voice, I couldn't spot her figure. In the next second, a long tail shot out of the darkness, and a scorpion monster appeared in front of me. She swung her giant pincers at me, but it didn't hurt at all. "Since you want to come here and cause trouble, try my 3000 attack power punch." I gathered all my strength into my right hand and landed a single blow. The scorpion's head exploded, and its limbs scattered across the room. At that moment, Sander's figure emerged from the shadows. He immediately shattered my scorpion puppet with one punch. "I was going to use her to twist your head off," he said, "but it looks like I'll have to do it myself." It was only now that I realized the person hiding in the dark was a female monster, but my head wasn't something she could easily twist off. Sander, however, made a disgusted face and said, "I wouldn't touch you with my hands. You're nothing but an annoying human." He added, "I can handle all the humans outside with one hand. Once you're dealt with, I'll go kill all the humans outside." Blood dripped from my nose, but I didn't retreat. Even if I exhausted all my energy, I would stop her. As I activated the system to lock onto Sander, she raised her leg and kicked at me. But instead of kicking me away, she used the space between her thigh and calf to trap me. She then knocked me to the ground, her other foot stepping on my body. What I didn't realize was that Sander had been locked by the system, and her agitation had reached 16%. She then raised her foot to lift my chin and said, "You humans aren't going anywhere. Noctis doesn't like it when anyone enters his room." While speaking, she began to grind her foot across my face. Such a powerful monster, I can't let her out. I opened my mouth and aimed at her delicate foot. The next second, Sander screamed, "You disgusting human. How dare you do that to my foot? She quickly pulled her foot away, looking at the saliva dripping between her toes with disgust. The thigh that had been pressing on my throat finally moved, and I was able to breathe again. But on the other side, Sander was fuming with anger, saying I would pay for soling her foot. I stood back up, ready to fight again, but I was unarmed and unable to use my teleporting slash. So, I charged at Sander with my fists, but she easily deflected my attacks. I made one wrong move, and she kicked me right in the face. In that moment, Sander seemed a little stunned. She thought, his face is so soft, it feels nice to kick. Even after retracting her foot, she couldn't help but wiggle her toes. Her agitation level had risen to 54%. The strange sensation made Sander rub her head, blushing, thinking, what the hell am I thinking? The most important thing right now is to kill this guy. If humans invade Noctis' room, it'll be trouble. With that, Sander used puppet magic again, controlling the remains of the scorpion monster to attack me. But even a full scorpion monster wouldn't be enough to stop me, let alone just the tail. After dodging the attack, I gathered all my magical power into my hand and struck the tail with a powerful blow, slicing it in half. Just then, a pair of black silk-covered, delicate feet appeared right next to my face. I couldn't believe it. Sander was pulling the same trick again. She locked my throat with her thigh, saying with a light laugh, "Gotcha again. This time, you won't escape. Get ready to be strangled by my feet." Though she didn't use her amazing tongue technique this time, she was about to let me feel her grip strength. She placed her palm on Shadier's thigh and squeezed tightly, breaking through Sander's defenses and preventing her from locking my throat. I quickly got up, only to have her stomp me back down. Her feet relentlessly rubbed against my face. "Don't even think about using your disgusting hands to touch my legs," she sneered. Then, using the severed scorpion tail, she pinned me to the ground. The difference in our levels made her strength overwhelming, and I couldn't dodge her attacks. At that moment, Sander raised her foot again, preparing to crush my skull beneath it, but strangely, as she was trampling me, it was kind of pleasurable, because the system was constantly raising my stats. Sander, still standing above me, seemed pleased, her agitation rising. Her excitement surged to 66%, and she began moving around on top of me, no longer just stepping on my face, but gradually shifting all over my body. The sensation made her agitation grow, reaching 89%. Then, she placed her foot between my legs. I panicked and yelled, "Not there," but she just spread her toes slightly and began pressing down. The feeling sent her into a state of bliss, and her agitation skyrocketed to 95%. Her face turned bright red, flushed with excitement, but just then, the scorpion she controlled lost its fighting ability. Liquid was dripping from its mouth, much like hers, in a rather cute way. And this was the perfect opportunity for Harris. He immediately used a tiger roar slash to cleave the stupid scorpion, sending it flying several meters away. The monster that had been overwhelming the raid team was now pushed back. Sander's agitation reached 98%, and she couldn't help but stick her tongue out, letting out strange sounds. The monsters she controlled were mimicking her, but their sounds were completely different. The raid team thought the monsters' cries were because Harris had struck them, but Sander didn't stop moving her feet on my body, slowly rubbing up and down. Meanwhile, the scorpion monster also started moving on the ground, rubbing against it. It looked as if both the monster and I were at the end of our ropes. Harris, full of confidence now, thought about challenging the monster to a one-on-one duel, wanting to show off his strength in front of his team. Sander, who had always hated being touched by humans, now seemed oddly intrigued by this human man. She even extended her foot towards him, as if she wanted to explore every inch of his body with her delicate toes. But as a human hero, I wouldn't submit to a beast girl. I opened my mouth wide and aimed directly at her foot. To my surprise, Sander didn't pull her foot away. Instead, she pushed it into my mouth, saying she didn't want to hear my disgusting voice, as she rewarded me harshly. Little did she know, every second of contact with me was raising my stats significantly. While I was growing stronger and feeling elated, Sander's breathing grew heavy. The scorpion monster she controlled began making strange sounds, its mouth drooling, and soon it was struck down by Harris's holy spinning slash. Even as the scorpion was about to be killed, its face turned red, as if it was immersed in some inexplicable pleasure. On the other side, Sander was completely ignoring the poor scorpion, still obsessed with the pleasure it gave her as she kept lifting and lowering her foot. The scorpion, which had been effortlessly defeating the raid team, was now completely useless, dying in Harris's hands. Meanwhile, Sander was lost in the sensations, one foot straight, the other slightly bent, enjoying the contrasting feelings as her excitement built up. Then, suddenly, a voice interrupted, "Sander, why is it so noisy outside?" The unexpected sound made Sander's pupils shrink in shock. She quickly jumped off me and scrambled away. The moment her feet hit the ground, I used all my strength to break free from the scorpion's tail. Now, Sander quickly calmed herself, remembering Noctis, and switched her expression. She was now focused on killing these humans to make up for her earlier mistakes. But after all the contact with Sander, my attack power had increased by a terrifying 10 points. The overwhelming pressure felt like facing Noctis himself, instantly extinguishing Sander's battle list. The only thing on her mind now was to escape and report to Noctis, having expended too much energy earlier. I chose to watch Sander flee. As I broke through a stone wall, searching for the main team, I ran into Belle, who had come looking for me. Seeing my armor covered in dust, she was worried and insisted on checking me over, even though I told her I was fine. Our close conversation, standing so near each other, made the vice captain, who had followed us, tighten his fists in jealousy. Meanwhile, the raid team was busy flattering Harris, who was puffed up with confidence. He believed this C-class dungeon was easier than a D-class one, and he was eager to solo the boss. He hoped this would earn him a good reputation, and maybe even a promotion and raise. Back in the boss room, Sander arrived and told Noctis about the strong human outside. Noctis, who was focused on something, didn't bother to look at his loyal subordinate and simply had Sander repeat his order. "Don't let any creature into your room." A moment later, Noctis coldly said, "Then why did you come in?" Sweat pouring down her face, Sander quickly tried to explain her actions, but before she could say anything, a light arrow shot through her chest, kicking up dust and smoke. The dungeon boss, Noctis, turned around and said he didn't want to hear any excuses. The arrow had come from one of his forehands. By now, Sander couldn't respond. Her body fell stiffly to the ground. With a gesture from Noctis, her body levitated, and with a gentle wave, she was thrown onto a pile of corpses, becoming his matchstick. However, Sander didn't die immediately. Deep down, she didn't want to die here just yet. Meanwhile, Noctis stared at the furnace demon in front of him, whispering, "After everything, it's almost done." He had used thousands of humans and beasts as fuel, and finally, the blood of the demon god began to bubble and boil. But just then, his door was violently kicked open. A human figure appeared in the room. The loud noise made Noctis turn his head, confused. "Who dares to make such a racket?" Harris, with a sneer, replied, "It's the hero that strikes fear into your heart." At this moment, the system gave me a prompt. The green liquid in front of me was the demon god's blood. Taking it would detoxify my body. As for the arrogant Harris, he thought he was the strong human Sander had mentioned. But suddenly, Harris ordered us, "No one move unless I say so. I'm going to solo the C-class dungeons, boss, and show these monsters how strong humans really are." But when he swung his sword at the boss, Noctis, not even a scratch appeared. Instead, Noctis flicked his finger, sending Harris flying hundreds of meters away. This only made Noctis more certain that Sander was completely useless. The strong human she spoke of was no match for him. On the other side, Harris was momentarily dazed. One hit had broken through his A-rank armor, but luckily, he was wearing the S-rank soft dragon scale armor his brother had given him underneath. Otherwise, he'd be a goner. The members of the adventurers team quickly rushed over to help him up, asking if he was okay. But Harris ignored them, still thinking about the huge power gap between the monsters in the dungeon. Then, an idea struck him. He decided to have his teammates wear down Noctis's stamina, and then he'd swoop in for the kill. And the time was right. He raised his weapon and gave the order for everyone to charge, telling them to use their strongest skills. The vice captain, Jerome, quickly tried to dissuade him. Charging in will only lead to unnecessary casualties. It's better to form a shield formation in front. But Harris snapped at him. "Are you questioning my judgment, or are you refusing to follow my orders?" Jerome quickly waved his hands in protest, insisting he wasn't. But Harris, pointing a finger at him, barked, "Stop talking." Just do what I say." Turning to the rest of the team, Harris rallied them with, "Don't be afraid. I'm your strongest backer." Hearing that, the team gained a newfound confidence and charged forward, weapons drawn. But in Noctis's eyes, they were nothing more than ants unworthy of even becoming altar fuel. "I'll show you the insurmountable gap between humans and monsters." As the wave of light shot toward them, I rushed in to save Belle and Tyrone, but as for the rest of the team, I couldn't do much. I could only watch as the light from Noctis melted them away. And Harris, who had been boasting about soloing the boss, found that even his sword was dissolved in the light. Meanwhile, Noctis slowly rose into the air above the altar and coldly asked, "Weren't you supposed to make me feel fear?" That Harris was paralyzed with fear after witnessing the destruction. He muttered, "We can't win. We need to escape." On the other side, Tyrone was checking the surviving members. Seeing the dismembered bodies of his fallen comrades, a wave of dread washed over him. To everyone's surprise, Harris still had the audacity to give orders, "All survivors, fall back." Tyrone, tears welling up, angrily shouted, "You're an arrogant fool." Just then, a hand grabbed Harris by the arm. "You just said you were the team's strongest support. Now that the battle with the boss isn't over, you can't leave." Harris struggled to break free, shouting, "I'm the leader. I make the decisions. If you want to die here, go ahead, but don't drag me into it." Noctis then spoke up, "You broke down my door and charged into my room. You think you can just run away now?" Harris's fear grew even more, knowing that the boss was about to release another devastating wave of light. Even as the boss was preparing his final blow, I didn't let go of Harris's arm. I held him tight. Seeing that I wouldn't release him, Harris clenched his fists and shouted, "You're just an A-rank weakling. You can't stop me." He swung the punch at me, but I effortlessly blocked it with one hand. Then, applying a little pressure, I heard a satisfying crack as I broke his arm. "Harris, as the leader, you're supposed to lead by example, right?" I said, before casually tossing him behind me, directly into the path of Noctis's light wave. In the next instant, Harris, like a lifeless doll, fell straight down. Now it was my turn to shine. On the other side, Tyrone and Belle hadn't left. They both chose to stay and fight the boss. Belle tried to persuade Tyrone to leave, saying it wasn't worth staying just because of me. But Tyrone shook his head and said he knew that, but he had come here to defeat monsters, not to follow Harris's orders anymore. Meanwhile, Noctis felt insulted by us. Even after witnessing his power, we weren't trying to escape. As Noctis prepared to release another light wave, I suddenly used my instant slash to rush forward and land a strike. Though it didn't deal much damage, it managed to tear through his robe. Taking advantage of Noctis's moment of distraction, as he tried to cover his chest, I shifted my focus and sprinted toward the demon god's blood on the altar. Noctis was momentarily confused. Why is he running toward the altar? Is his goal not to kill me, but the demon god's blood? Until now, Noctis had always been a cold, ruthless figure, sacrificing victims on the sands of the altar without hesitation. That as the torn robe revealed, beneath that cold exterior lay a beastwoman with an absolutely stunning figure. While Kana Noctis's true form scrambled to cover herself, I darted toward the altar and the demon god's blood. Seeing this, Noctis roared, "Filthy human, stay away from my altar." What he didn't realize was that Belle and Tyrone had already moved into position behind him. Spotting the opening, they swung their weapons with all their strength, but Noctis was a boss with forearms. Two of them instantly shot out to block their attacks. Meanwhile, Noctis's fourth hand began charging up another light wave, preparing to deal with the cockroach dashing toward the altar. Belle, however, wouldn't let Noctis harm me. Planting her back foot for support and channeling all her strength, she rammed into Noctis with full force. Caught off guard, Noctis toppled over, and the charging light wave veered off course, missing me entirely. I leapt toward the altar, reaching out for the demon god's blood, the cure to my poison, but just as my hand was about to touch it, a strange magic circle appeared around the altar. The next moment, a powerful force burst from within the circle, sending me flying backward. As it turned out, this was a magic circle personally inscribed by Noctis, ensuring that no creature other than himself could approach the altar. It became clear that directly rushing to drink the demon god's blood was impossible. If I wanted the cure, we'd have to defeat the boss first. At that moment, I noticed something in the cracks of the wall. Tearing through the gap, I saw the recently escaped beastwoman, Sander, curled up and trembling inside. Her expression changed drastically when she noticed me. "Please," she begged, "don't make a sound." Meanwhile, Belle and Tyrone had already been defeated by Noctis. Kana Noctis's true form was preparing to sacrifice them to quell her anger. Sensing Belle's dire situation, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a blue-capped mushroom, a special item meant to restore Beastwoman's stamina. Without a word, I placed it on the ground and turned to run toward Belle. Inside the cave, Sander carefully reached out for the mushroom, biting into it with tears streaming down her face. System notification: Beastwoman Sander has developed positive feelings toward the player. Weapon unlock conditions met. Weapon frontier rules have been unlocked. Just as I was about to save Belle, I was pulled into the system interface. At such a critical moment, I didn't have time for this nonsense, so I skipped past the weapon frontier rules. System prompt: please draw a card. While sprinting, I accidentally brushed against a card floating nearby. Instantly, a divine weapon appeared in my hands, a powerful sword. With my new weapon in hand, I leapt high into the air and swung down, aiming to let Noctis experience the sword's power firsthand. But to my surprise, Noctis blocked the strike with ease. She laughed. "You fell for it. These two were just bait. My real target has always been you, and now you've delivered yourself to me. How will you escape this time?" I smirked. "Who said I was planning to run?" Without hesitation, I swung again. This time, my sword managed to graze Noctis's hand, slicing her skin. Noctis raised her hand and sneered. "Not even a drop of blood. This is the difference between humans and monsters." But in the next second, the unexpected happened. Noctis's entire outfit was shredded, leaving her completely exposed except for her chest, which she barely managed to cover with her hands. Belle and Tyrone stood frozen in shock. He actually stripped a boss. Meanwhile, I wiped a nosebleed and muttered, "What a powerful monster." System notification: the explosive armor sword has a unique effect. Hitting a target triggers armor destruction. When fully stripped, the target activates a finishing move, Holy Blade Descent. Noctis, now visibly flustered, tried to cover herself with her forearms, her face glowing bright red. "You disgusting human. I'll kill you for this." Even stripped, Noctis remained ferocious. She dodged my instant slash and used her size 11 feet to kick me across the room. But compared to the pain I endured when the poison acted up, this was nothing. Picking myself up, I charged at her again with the explosive armor sword, relentlessly pressing my attack. Realizing the sword's effect, Noctis stopped blocking my strikes outright, choosing instead to dodge. After all, it had only grazed her hand, and her upper robe was gone. If I hit her legs, her lower robes would be next. Once her entire outfit was gone, all that would be left would be the face covering. Destroying that would trigger the finishing move, ending the battle. With this plan in mind, I activated instant slash again, aiming for her legs, but Noctis leapt into the air, dodging my strike. My second attempt missed as well, and I was starting to get frustrated. Damn it! How did I miss again? Meanwhile, Noctis began to grow suspicious of my relentless attacks on her legs. She guessed I was trying to destroy her lower robe. When I aimed for her legs a third time, she didn't dodge. Instead, she counterattacked, calling me a perverted fool as her size 11 foot smashed into my face. The impact sent me flying dozens of meters, the force nearly breaking my nose, but compared to the pain of my body slowly melting from the poison, this was nothing. Instant slash cooldown. 5 seconds remain. For now, I could only rely on my speed to close the gap. Noctis, meanwhile, raised a single finger, charging up her devastating light wave attack. A second later, the light wave shot toward me. Thankfully, I was ready and managed to dodge it, continuing my sprint toward her. Cooldown. 2 seconds remaining. Noctis seemed puzzled at how I avoided her attack. That was when I activated instant slash again, aiming straight for her legs. "At this distance, let's see how you dodge this," I shouted, swinging my sword downward. The satisfying resistance I felt told me I'd finally hit her. But when I looked up, I froze in disbelief. Wait, what? It turned out that I hadn't hit her legs, I'd only struck her tail, hovering above me. Noctis looked down and sneered, "Not running anymore. You know, if I didn't have to worry about exposing myself, I have turned you into ashes by now." While I was still processing her taunt, she raised her finger again and unleashed another light wave. This time, no matter where I ran, the light wave followed me. With instant slash still on cooldown, I had no way to create enough distance. Damn it. 10 seconds is way too long, I cursed, realizing I had no choice but to face it head-on. I stopped running and swung my sword at the incoming light wave. In the next moment, the wave powerful enough to defeat countless heroes shattered under my blade. Tyrone and Belle, watching from the side, were stunned. Even Tyrone, a B-rank warrior, couldn't block that attack. How was I, an F-rank rookie just days ago, standing my ground? As the smoke cleared, I stood there gripping my divine sword, marveling at its power. This sword's properties are insane, I muttered. Then, turning to Noctis, I declared, your attacks. I can dodge them if I want, or break them if I feel like it. In other words, they're useless against me. Noctis glared at me. You're right, I can't seem to hurt you. But then, raising one arm, she added, but I can easily kill that injured woman over there. She fired another light wave, this time aimed directly at Belle. Panicked, I used instant slash, aiming for Noctis's finger, but I only managed to clip her nail. By the time I realized I was too late, the light wave was already hurtling toward Belle. Desperate, I dashed toward her. Seeing this, Noctis sneered. Foolish human, always playing the hero, always getting killed by monsters from behind. She raised her other hand and fired another light wave this time, straight at me. Meanwhile, I was still focused on saving Belle from the light wave. Running over in time wasn't an option, so I had to make Belle the system's target. Once locked onto her, I could trigger instant slash through the newbie auto-trigger mechanism. With a flash, I appeared in front of Belle, using the slash to disperse the light wave. Even so, the shockwave shattered their armor, but at least I saved her in the nick of time, even deflecting Noctis's follow-up strike. Before Noctis could launch another attack, the demon god's blood on the altar began to cool due to the low temperature. Noticing this, Kana Noctis panicked and rushed to stabilize its temperature. If the blood solidified, all her efforts would be wasted, and she'd have to wait another 100 years. On the other side, Belle, still under the system's lock, began to feel strange. Her agitation level had risen to 91%, leaving her body feeling uncomfortably warm. This is like a girl who's had a crush for 18 years finally working up the courage to approach the boy she likes, only to F him shove her away in panic. The memory flashed in my mind. When Belle was 8, she ran up to me, snot running down her face, trying to get close to me. Even though Belle had grown into a stunning young woman, the trauma of that moment left me unable to handle it. I pushed Belle away again, shouting, "No." As if reliving that childhood nightmare. Embarrassed, Belle's face turned red as she mumbled, "How humiliating." Tyrone, standing nearby, thought Belle had simply lost control for a moment. Meanwhile, Kana was frantically burning stored monster corpses as fuel to reheat the demon god's blood. If she succeeded in evaporating it completely, I'd lose the only cure for my blood rain poison. I have to stop her, I muttered, but Kana was too fast for me to land a hit. The only solution was to weaken her so she couldn't dodge, and the way to do that, destroy the last of her clothing and mask with the explosive armor sword. Triggering its finishing move, I turned to Bella and said, "I have a plan to defeat the boss, but I'll need your help." Grasping her hands dramatically, I declare, "As long as with someone like you, and then if you could, well, you get the idea, I'll gain enough strength to defeat her." Belle's face turned beet red as she listened to me. Even Tyrone looked dumbfounded. "How can he spout such indecent nonsense with such a serious face?" Tyrone muttered. But Belle didn't object, even after hearing my bizarre request. Seeing her hesitation, I pleaded again, "I know it's awkward for you, but this is the only way." Suddenly, Tyrone stepped between us, tearing our hands apart. "You pervert," he shouted. "You're just trying to take advantage of Belle, even at a time like this." Tyrone turned to Belle. "Don't believe a word from this liar." Belle, however, lowered her head shyly and patted her chest. "I believe him." Then, blushing fiercely, she placed her hands on my shoulders. "It's not for you," she stammered. "It's just for defeating the monster." As her hands touched my face and her body leaned closer, a flood of childhood memories hit me. I remember 8-year-old Belle playing house with me. Back then, she played the dad, and I was the mom. She puckered her lips, saying she wanted to kiss me and take responsibility. Traumatized, I yelled, "No," and pushed Belle away again. Belle stumbled backward, looking hurt. Why does he keep pushing me away? She thought, confused. Tyrone, meanwhile, looked utterly crushed. My system detected his emotional damage and gave me a level up. System notification. Level increased by 1. All stats increased by 5,000. Perfect, I muttered. Now I don't have to touch Belle anymore and risk reliving those horrifying memories. As Belle got back to her feet, I told her, "It's fine now, I can take care of the boss myself." But Belle, still agitated, insisted, "Wait, what if you can't? Don't you need me to help you?" Her agitation level hit 99%, and as she leaned in, looking alluring, I remained calm and said coldly, "I don't need your help." Rejected, Belle slumped to the ground, whispering, "Why aren't you interested in me at all?" Tyrone stepped forward. "I still want to know," Belle sighed. "Is it about that thing again?" After leveling up, I felt a surge of confidence. I knew that if I could strike both the boss's head and legs simultaneously, I could unlock the finishing move. Before, I had narrowly missed landing the decisive blow. Now, with this newfound strength, I was certain I could do it. At this point, Kana had burned through every monster corpse she had, but it still wasn't enough to maintain the temperature of the demon god's blood. If the heat dropped any further, all her efforts would go to waste, and she'd have to wait another 100 years. Desperate, she set her sights on the 3 humans before her. Spreading her forearms wide, she flew toward me and sneered, "Filthy human, become fuel for my ritual." She began gathering energy in midair, determined to eliminate me quickly and use me as firewood for the altar. But instead of panicking, I stared at Noctis's exposed upper body and commented, "Wow, those are impressive." Her face flushed with rage as she hurled the energy ball directly at me. Unlike her light waves, this wasn't something I could simply cut apart with my sword. I had to use my dwindling mana to defend myself, or I'd be obliterated. While my mana drained rapidly, Noctis seemed to have an infinite supply. Eventually, my mana hit rock bottom, leaving me defenseless. Seeing this, Noctis chuckled darkly, "Out of mana, are you? Looks like our battle ends here." Suddenly, 2 hands wrapped around me from behind, pulling me into a warm embrace. It was Belle, holding me tightly against her chest. "You clearly need my help," she said softly. Nearby, Tyrone watched Belle's affectionate gesture. Remembering the time she had friend-zoned him, his heart shattered. Belle ignored him, her voice trembling as she confessed, "From the moment I was a child, my heart always belonged to someone, and that someone is you." As her words resonated within me, a sudden surge of power erupted from deep inside. System notification. Level increased by 5. All stats increased by 27,500. The newfound power left Kana stunned. "Where did this human get such overwhelming strength?" she muttered. With one powerful swing of my sword, I struck Noctis, shredding her remaining clothing and mask, unlocking the finishing move Holy Blade Descent. But Noctis wasn't done yet. Enraged, she funneled all her energy into a massive energy ball. This time, I wasn't going to just defend. Wielding the explosive armor sword, I launched the finishing move straight at Noctis. The collision of power created a massive explosion, kicking up clouds of dust. When the dust settled, Kana lay motionless in the center of the room, completely exposed. Though Holy Blade Descent was now on a 20-second cooldown, it seemed I didn't need it. Kana appeared defeated. I turned my attention toward the altar, making my way to the demon god's blood. But just as I approached, the altar began to hum, a magical barrier forming around it. What's going on? Why hasn't the magic circle disappeared? It turned out that Kana had barely survived the attack. Struggling to her feet, she refused to let me near the demon god's blood. Even though Holy Blade Descent had 9 seconds left on its cooldown, I was confident I could finish Kana in that time. Just then, the system alerted me. System notification. Belle's HP is critically low. Imminent death detected. Kana also rose unsteadily, preparing to block my path to the altar. I had to make a choice, save Belle or secure the demon god's blood to cure myself. In the end, I chose Belle, scooping her up in my arms. I grabbed Tyrone and bolted toward the dungeon exit without looking back. Kana watched me retreat, her body collapsing to the ground as I left the demon god's blood behind. Thankfully, the system's earlier reward, a map of the dungeon, allowed me to find the quickest route to the exit. But to reach the guild hospital in time, I'd have to risk stirring up lurking monsters. As Belle lay in my arms, barely conscious. Memories of her childhood surfaced. Back then, Belle was mocked for her unattractive appearance. No one wanted to play house with her, and mischievous boys even teased that she should play the monkey, but I never teased her. When one boy, basketball in hand, tried to pull me away, saying that staying near Belle would make me ugly too, I didn't listen. Instead, I punched that boy in the face. That boy was Tyrone. As Tyrone ran off crying, I turned to Belle and said, "I'll play with you. I'll be the dad, and you'll be the mom. Okay." I even kissed her forehead and said, "I'll take responsibility for you." Back in the present, I pressed on with the explosive armor sword in hand, following the shortest route to the exit. Meanwhile, back at the altar, Kana, realizing the demon god's blood was cooling too quickly, made a final, desperate decision. She sacrificed herself, using her own body as fuel to keep the blood from solidifying. Engulfed in flames, her only regret was that she could no longer serve the demon god. As her body burned away, the explosive armor sword in my hand disintegrated as well. Returning to the system notification, weapon retrieval in progress. Weapon will be accessible again in 12 hours. But it didn't matter, the exit was in sight. At the dungeon exit, the remaining members of the raid team finally made it out. However, Harris, the so-called leader, was quick to shift blame. He claimed that our failure was entirely my fault, and in his mind, I was likely already dead at the hands of the boss. But in the next moment, I emerged from the shadows, carrying Belle in my arms and dragging Tyrone behind me. Seeing this, Harris assumed I had fled alongside the others. Disobeying his orders as raid team captain, furious, he snatched a sword from one of the team members and stepped in front of me, blocking my path. As the captain, I revoke your membership in the raid team. You'll never use the guild's medical resources again to extend your pathetic life. And right here, Before he could finish his sentence, I kicked him square in the face. I didn't have time for this idiot. My only focus was on saving Belle, who was on the brink of death. One of the other team members shouted, "Quick! Get the captain to the guild hospital." Meanwhile, deep in the dungeon, my beastwoman ally, Sander, had unwittingly stumbled into a nightmare. The once mighty boss Noctis had sacrificed herself as fuel to summon someone far more terrifying, the demon god Sados. The altar, lacking just a bit of heat, had finally reached the required temperature with Noctis's self-immolation. The green demon god's blood began to bubble and turn red. It expanded rapidly, spraying into the air and covering the entire altar before condensing into a single massive door. The door, veiled in a crimson curtain, had a golden bell hanging above it. From a crack in the wall, Sander watched in awe and curiosity, wondering what had been summoned. Suddenly, two pale hands emerged, parting the crimson veil as a suffocating aura filled the air. The oppressive presence made Sander retreat instinctively, her entire body trembling. It felt as if needles were piercing her bones. A figure wrapped in white cloth stepped through the veil, his hair transforming from the crimson curtain behind him. Taking a deep breath, he declared, "Ah, this familiar scent, this is my garden. Humanity belongs to me. I, demon god Sados, have returned." Sander's instincts screamed danger. She turned and fled deeper into the dungeon, desperate to escape. But her presence had already been noticed. Sados casually approached the crack where Sander hid. Placing his hand against the stone, he swept it upward. A tremendous force erupted, collapsing the upper levels of the dungeon where monsters stood guard. The explosion sent debris flying, revealing Sander's hiding spot. She was caught immediately. Meanwhile, the monsters above gathered near the destruction, arguing over whether it was Noctis's doing. Sados silenced them with a chilling statement, "Noctis is dead." He added, "I'll need a new servant." Faced with a being even stronger than Noctis, one monster immediately fell to its knees, offering its servitude. Seeing this, the others quickly followed suit, pledging their loyalty as well. But Sados merely looked at them with disdain. "Disgusting," he muttered. Then, with a wave of his left hand, the monsters who had just sworn allegiance exploded into pieces. To Sados, it was as trivial as swatting a fly. "I have no need for ugly servants," he said coldly. He then turned his gaze to the trembling Sander, who sat frozen in fear. Smiling, Sados said, "You may lift your head now. Open your mouth, I'll give you something nice." Despite the humiliation, Sander, tears streaming down her face, obeyed. Sados dripped a green liquid into her mouth and ordered her to swallow it. The next moment, Sander's body began to radiate with a powerful sensation. Her injuries healed rapidly as her body started to repair itself, lifting her chin. Sados asked mockingly, "Feels good, doesn't it? My blood can heal and protect you from all harm, while also enhancing your strength. And the process itself is pure ecstasy, isn't it?" Sander, overwhelmed by the sensation, remained silent, her tears falling even faster. Finally, Sados commanded, "Night has fallen. Go find a clean room and wait for me." At the guild building, the dungeon raid team's captain, Harris, was pinned against a desk. S-rank adventurer Darren, furious about the failed mission, pressed Harris's head down with his golden right hand and scolded him harshly. Tears welled up in Harris's eyes as he whimpered, "I'm sorry. Please, big brother, help me out. If they find out about the stolen resources, we're finished." Hearing this, Darren released Harris with a sigh. "I know," he muttered, pulling out a stack of papers. "There's a guy in your team who disobeyed your orders, isn't there?" Darren said with a sly grin. "Just pin the entire failure on him. Charge him with desertion and sentence him to death." Meanwhile, I had already returned to the dungeon. After watching Belle being wheeled into the guild hospital's operating room, I made my decision. I had to return to Noctis's altar and retrieve the demon god's blood to cure the blood rain poison. But when I got back, the dungeon had changed dramatically. The once intact rooms and floors were now in ruins, with rubble and debris everywhere. I rushed to the altar, only to find that the demon god's blood was gone. Deep within the dungeon, in a pristine room, Sander sat nervously on the edge of a bed. Suddenly, two hands slid over her shoulders and cheeks from behind. Blushing furiously, Sander stammered, "Sados-sama, please don't do this." But instead of letting go, Sados tightened his embrace. Something soft pressed against Sander's back, and she couldn't help but feel that something was off. Then, Sados leaned in close to her ear and blew gently. Terrified, Sander broke free from his grasp only to find that Sados had transformed into a woman. "Don't you like hugs?" Sados asked sweetly, smiling at Sander's shocked expression. Seeing her confusion, Sados explained, "At night, I lose all my power and turn into a girl. Your job is to protect me during these times and kill anyone who poses a threat. And don't even think about rebelling or running away." Sados continued coldly, "The blood I left in your body can dissolve you in an instant." Meanwhile, I searched every room in the dungeon but found nothing. The demon god's blood had to be somewhere. It was my only hope. Activating the map, I resolved to comb through the remaining areas. Not long after, Sander sensed something unusual, a presence drawing closer. Before leaving to investigate, Sados warned her, "Don't stray more than 5 kilometers from me, or your body will dissolve." By now, I had scoured nearly the entire dungeon. Only one room remained. As I focused my attention on the last room, I didn't notice Sander lurking nearby. The next moment, her 2.5-meter-long legs lashed out, aiming a powerful kick at me. Luckily, my enhanced reflexes kicked in, and I managed to dodge just in time. Recognizing me, Sander quickly pulled back her long, black stocking-clad leg. Meanwhile, Sados suddenly shivered, gasping for breath. Confused, she muttered to herself, "This reaction, it only happens when I'm near my heart." Elsewhere, Sander stood with one hand on her hip, glaring at me. "Noctis is dead. What are you doing back here? Get out of here before sunrise." Seeing that Sander had regained her combat strength, I couldn't help but smile. "By the way, how was that mushroom I gave you? Tasty, right?" At this, Sander's face turned bright red. That mushroom was the most disgusting thing I've ever eaten." "Now get lost," she snapped, but my system had other ideas. System notification. Sander's affection level has risen to 71%. Higher than I expected, I thought. However, the ever-proud Sander immediately switched back to hostile mode. Lifting her long legs, she tried to kick me. "Shut up already," she barked, as her foot slammed toward my face. To prove she had no feelings for me, she even went as far as pressing her stocking-clad foot against my face. But as she applied pressure, I vanished from under her foot. I had already sensed the demon god's blood behind the nearby door. As I reached out to push it open, a woman stepped out from the room, and my hand brushed against something soft. Startled, I pulled my hand back. But Sados, now in her delicate, nighttime form, seized the opportunity to retaliate. A sharp pain shot through my lower body. She aimed a low blow, causing me to scream. To Sados, the source of my pain was something far more valuable. It's there, she whispered. The heart I'm missing is inside your filthy body. Fortunately, in her current fragile state, she lacked the strength to follow through. I shoved her away, clutching myself in agony. What are you doing? I shouted. At that moment, the system chimed in. System notification. The demon god's blood is right in front of you. Wait. What? I thought. My antidote is a person. Curious, I made a small cut on Sados's palm and leaned in to suck the blood. Sados, unable to resist, could only glare at me in humiliation, but to my dismay, the system reported. System notification. Poison not neutralized. What? I exclaimed. Her blood doesn't work. Sados smirked internally. In this form, I'm just a human, of course it won't work. Just then, Sander snapped out of her shock and sent a powerful kick my way, separating me and Sados. As we stood apart, neither of us seemed willing to leave. I needed the demon god's blood to survive. Sados, meanwhile, eyed me with growing rage. The demon god's heart, her heart was now trapped in my body, absorbed into what she called my filthy lower half. Her solution, reabsorb it into her body by force. As punishment, she hissed, your body will dissolve into blood the moment I take it back. My mind, however, was elsewhere. If her blood isn't the cure, maybe it's some other liquid from her body. I decided I'd figure it out later. For now, I just needed to take her somewhere safe for further research. The ground suddenly cracked open as a massive spider demon emerged. Sados Sama, the spider cry, even from miles away. I could smell your divine presence. It makes my very soul tremble. The spider pointed to a bell hanging from its neck. I've never taken off the bell you blessed me with. Surely this proves my devotion. Now let me consume you, so you will belong to me forever. As the spider lunged toward Sados, I acted first. Scooping her into my arms, I leapt through a nearby opening. I needed to get her to safety. The spider screeched and chased after us, trying to snatch Sados from my grasp. But once we reached the outskirts of the human city, the spider had no choice but to retreat. I successfully escaped and brought Sados back to my home at the Adventurers Guild. Now inside my home, Sados began scheming. She fantasized about reclaiming her heart and going on a rampage, slaughtering everyone in sight. But as her thoughts spiraled, she suddenly wrapped her arms around me, caressing the back of my head. She whispered, "Brave hero, I've been cursed by a terrible monster. If I don't unite with a man soon, I'll die. Please, save me." I froze. As a noble and righteous hero, how could I possibly refuse such a vulnerable woman? Her soft voice continued, pleading, "The curse will kill me without a man. You're my only hope." As a hero, I knew my duty was to ease the suffering of those in need. And if that meant bearing the burden of this profound inner torment, then so be it. At the most critical moment, I noticed something strange about Sados. Wait, why does this woman have a tail? I thought, confused. But something was off. Tails are supposed to be on the back, not the front. My confusion turned to horror as my eyes landed on a certain unmistakable male feature. What the? I blurted out, stumbling backward in shock. This perfect soft girl had that. I shoved Sados away, retreating rapidly until my back hit the wall. My movements were so frantic that the little pink lizard in my pocket tumbled out onto the floor. Trembling, I stammered, "Why do you have that too?" But Sados didn't seem to care. "You promised to save me." She snapped, lunging closer. It hit me. Dawn was approaching, and she was already beginning to transform back into her male form. Panicked, I clamped my lips shut, determined to avoid any surprise attacks. Suddenly, a humming noise came from the ground. Both Sados and I turned to see the pink lizard glowing as it transformed into a humanoid beast woman. Now in human form, Eugene stumbled toward me, clutching her stomach. "Master, I'm so hungry, I'm starving. And this place is way too small, I can't even stretch my body properly." Taking the opportunity to escape Sados, I pointed at Eugene and said, "See, she needs my help more than you right now. Wait here, I'll cook something for her first." While cooking, I couldn't stop thinking about how to save Sados. I still needed her alive to cure the poison in my body. But did that mean I had to deal with her? The thought sent shivers down my spine. I can't do it. There's got to be another way. But Sados was growing impatient. "If you won't help me willingly," she growled. "I'll take matters into my own hands." Before I could react, she hugged me from behind while I was at the stove. Luckily, her human body was too weak to hold me down, and I managed to break free. Bolting out of the kitchen, when I reached the living room, I noticed Eugene was gone. Only a wagging tail remained in sight. Following the tail, I found Eugene in the bathroom, drinking toilet cleaner. "Eugene, what are you doing? That's for cleaning toilets." But Eugene seemed thrilled, exclaiming, "It's delicious." After finally handing her the food, Sados crossed her arms and said, "Okay, you helped her. Now it's my turn. Let's talk about this," I said, trying to calm her down. But Sados refused to listen, demanding help right now. At that moment, the system chimed in. "System notification. Weapon retrieval complete." Before I could process the message, all my clothes vanished, leaving me with only a small white cloth. Then, the system announced my next task, run through the streets wearing only the cloth. Wave to 33 people who would do something so ridiculous. I yelled. The system clarified. Failure consequence. You will be sent to Reverse Ascension Heaven, a place filled with vengeful spirits eager to play with you. Reverse Ascension Heaven. That sounds terrifying. I glanced at the tiny cloth in my hand. It barely covered anything if I held it horizontally. It covered the front but left the back exposed. Vertically, it wouldn't free my hands to wave. Either way, I was going to be exposed. But there was no way I was going to play with vengeful spirits. Reluctantly, I handed Sados over to Eugene and headed out. Eugene stared at me, stunned. "Do humans normally go out without clothes?" Sados, now entirely focused on waiting for daylight to reclaim her strength, ignored her. Eugene held up the toilet cleaner and asked, "Do you want to try this? It's really good." Sados glared at her. Kajik managed to shout a warning. "She's poisonous. Don't touch her body." The remaining two adventurers froze momentarily, horrified by their captain's condition, despite the fear. One stepped forward. "I'll hold her off. You get Charlton out of here." Hearing this, Kanna's grin widened. "You're going to stall me," she mocked. "How bold. Let's see if you're up to the task." Meanwhile, my weapon retrieval mission had only 1 minute left on the timer. The adventurer who volunteered to hold Kanna off was no match for her. She lightly touched his head, and poison spread rapidly downward. He could only let out a harrowing scream as the toxin consumed him. Kanna closed her eyes, basking in the sound like it was her favorite melody. Only after he went silent did she release his lifeless body, still craving more screams. Kanna turned her attention to Charlton, who was frantically calling for help. Hearing Charlton's cries, I rushed back to the scene. "Let him go, you oversized arachnid," I yelled, wildly waving my hands to finish my mission. The moment I completed the final wave, the system confirmed, "Mission complete." In an instant, my clothes reappeared, along with the strength I had gained from my prior Beastwoman encounters. The system then prompted me to draw a weapon card. This time, I received the Silent Divine Finger. Effect: transfers the sensation of touch from a locked target to nearby objects. When the target emits a genuine cry from deep within their heart, the power of silence is triggered. At that moment, Kanna realized it was me and abandoned Charlton, turning to confront me. "Where's the demon god?" "Sados," she snarled. "That was my cure. I worked so hard to get it back." "Hand it over." "Not a chance," I shot back. Kanna's eyes darkened. "Fine. I'll kill you first, then find it myself." In the next instant, all 8 of her spider legs lunged toward me. I narrowly dodged the attack and managed to lock onto her with the Silent Divine Finger. As I retreated, I placed my hand on the ground, transferring the sensation to Kanna. Kanna froze mid-attack, her face twisting in confusion. "What the? Who's touching me?" That strange feeling made her let out an involuntary shout. Shout value: 12%. Power of silence activated. An invisible force struck Kanna, slamming her into the ground. When the attack ended, she quickly covered her body with her arms and glared at me. "You were touching me." Then I yelled. "And you hit me again. What kind of ability is this?" Kanna looked down at me with a mix of annoyance and intrigue. "Fine. Let's begin this strange little battle of ours. Human," she said. Facing Kanna, a venomous spider beastwoman, I had only one option: use the Silent Divine Finger to attack from a distance. Each time she felt my phantom touch, she would cry out, triggering the power of silence to strike her down. But Kana despised being touched by anyone other than the demon god. "Touching my body comes with a price," she hissed. "You'll die screaming, just like everyone else who try." Kana's towering figure loomed over me, her poisonous hands forcing me to retreat. Cornered against a wall, I had no choice but to get creative. Using my right hand, I rubbed against the wall, transferring the sensation to Kana's underarms. "AHHH," Kana screamed, unable to hold back. Shout value. 43%. Power of silence intensify. This time, the invisible force hit her even harder. Through the feedback from the silent divine finger, I realized I'd targeted her armpits. Kana clutched her arms to her sides, glaring at me while trying to suppress her reaction. "I won't let you make me scream again," she declared. But the ticklish sensation lingered, and to her horror, Kana felt a brief flicker of enjoyment. "What? Only the demon god can make me feel this way. How dare a filthy human?" The bell on her collar chimed softly, snapping her back to reality. "I shouldn't even be having thoughts like this. I'm an idiot," Kana exclaimed, slapping her own forehead in frustration. Green blood trickled down her face as she muttered, "This will cleanse me. Surely, the demon god will forgive me now." Watching Kana literally bash her own head, I couldn't help but think, "This spider is completely nuts." Kana suddenly lay down, raising her tail high into the air. Gripping the tip of her tail, she pulled out a weapon hidden within. "Your attacks are weird," she said, wincing as she extracted the weapon. "But let's see how you handle this." "My attacks are weird. Look where you're pulling that weapon from," I retorted, thinking back to the points I'd targeted: the chest, the armpits, and now, somewhere behind it all started to make sense. If my calculations were correct, her weak point would be right there. I turned and bolted, determined to test my theory. Kana misinterpreted my retreat as cowardice. "Too late to run now," she shouted, launching a venomous strike. Thanks to my enhanced agility, I dodged her attack, but Kana anticipated this. She aimed her tail and fired a barrage of webs, ensnaring me completely. "You're trapped now," she declared, raising her weapon. "Time to die." But the silent divine finger wasn't bound by mere webs. With a few quick motions, I freed my right hand. I placed it on the wall near her suspected weak point and began tapping. Kana froze as the sensation hit her. What is this? Some kind of weird human magic? Desperately trying to suppress her reaction, she gritted her teeth. But despite her best efforts, a small, muffled sound escaped her lips. MMPH. Shout value. 1%. Power of silence activated. This time, the resulting attack was barely a breeze, ruffling her hair. Kana flushed with pride. "See, so long as I don't cry out, you can't hurt me." But when she turned her attention back to the wall, she realized the webs were gone. "Did he escape?" she muttered. "Didn't say I was leaving," I replied from behind her. Kana turned, her smug expression fading into shock. "You idiot, that was your only chance to run," she shouted, sealing her own mouth with webbing. "Now, I won't make a sound. Let's see how you fight me when you can't use your tricks." On the other side of the battlefield, I didn't look like someone about to meet his doom. "Just now, the spot you felt it was at your inner thigh?" I asked with a smirk. Kana's face flushed red. What kind of disgusting human are you?" she stammered, horrified by how accurate I was. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. "So, I was right. Once I lock onto you, your body's proportions are mapped onto the environment," I explained. "Which means, this next phase is going to be, let's call it, a one-sided beatdown." Kana's expression darkened as I continued. "I'll target all the spots that make you lose your mind. Get ready, Kana, here we go." Kana grew so confident, she believed she had me all figured out. "No matter what part of my body you touch, I won't make a sound," she declared internally. Meanwhile, I prepared my next move, equally confident. I placed my hands onto walls nearby. These corresponded to Kana's lower body. As soon as I touched them, Kana's entire body stiffened, her back arching involuntarily. This time, the sensation was different, deeper, more intense, like it came from within her. Kana gritted her teeth, refusing to give in. "I won't betray the demon god Sados. No human could ever compare to him, no matter how much it." Before she could finish her thought, I stepped it up. "Let's see how you handle this," I shouted, rapidly rubbing my hands against the walls. Kana froze mid-attack. The overwhelming sensation surged straight to her head, leaving her visibly trembling. Watching from a distance, Charlton, the vice guildmaster, had been observing the fight intently. Seeing the beastwoman squirm and shake, he couldn't hold back his amazement. Incredible! What kind of magic is this? He muttered to himself. How does he make a beastwoman moan like that? I need to learn this. Meanwhile, Kana couldn't help but wonder. How is he doing this? That strange sensation, like it was coming from inside her, it was too good. She had never felt anything like it before. Even the image of her beloved Sados was beginning to blur in her mind. No. I need to stay calm. I belong to Lord Sados. This human means nothing, Kana thought, trying to regain her focus. Still not making a sound. Huh, I said with a grin. Guess I'll just have to up the intensity. Kana took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her eyes sharpened with determination. I won't lose to a disgusting human like you, she declared. She activated Toxic Forge, channeling all the venom in her body into her weapon. With her blade dripping in green poison, Kana lunged at me at full speed. But I wasn't going down that easily. You're not the only one with special techniques, I shouted, placing my hands back on the walls. I started slapping and rubbing them again, sending that overwhelming sensation straight to Kana. Her legs wobbled, and she collapsed to the ground, completely immobilized. Kana glared at me, her body trembling but her resolve unshaken. If I don't kill him soon, she thought, panic creeping into her mind, Sados will disappear from my heart. Summoning every ounce of strength, Kana hurled a poison-tipped arrow at me. I tilted my head just enough to dodge it, but that was just a distraction. Kana had hidden a secondary blade within the arrow. As the blade hit the ground, it released a burst of toxic gas. Kana smirked, convinced she had me this time. In this small space, there's no way you can escape. You're drenched in my poison. You're as good as dead. But when the gas cleared, I was nowhere to be seen. From above, a voice echoed. Same trick twice. Come on, Kana, you can do better. Kana's eyes darted upward, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to sheer disbelief. I was perched on the roof, grinning down at her. How did he jump up there in time? She thought, completely dumbfounded. I crouched, ready to pounce. Now it's my turn, I declared. I leapt down into the narrow alleyway, planting my hands on both walls to control my descent. To Kana, this wasn't just a simple drop. The speed, the intensity, it hit her like nothing she'd ever experienced before. For Kana, those split seconds felt like an eternity. Before I even landed, she couldn't take it anymore. I want to devour this human, she screamed. Her voice broke through the webbing she'd used to seal her mouth. Kana's scream meter shot up to 100%. The moment she hit her limit, Silent Divine Finger triggered. An invisible force struck Kana, shattering the bell on her collar. The impact created a massive explosion, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Kana's magic reserves dropped to 0. Her beast form unraveled, leaving behind her true self a large, venomous piercing spider. With that, the battle was over. Kana lay defeated, her power drained completely. As the system recalled Silent Divine Finger, I approached Kana's original form, a small, exhausted spider. I gently picked her up. A system notification popped up. Kana's affection level, 100%, I grinned. Not only that, I had unlocked a new passive ability, Conqueror's Gift. Defeating a boss granted their unique skill. Kana's skill, Toxic Forge, allowed me to imbue my weapons with deadly poison. Looks like I just unlocked weapon enchantments, nice. Just as I was basking in the excitement of unlocking a new passive skill, I felt a presence behind me. I found you, said a smooth, deep voice. Here we go, I thought. Sados had survived his powerless nighttime form and was back in his full-powered, daytime glory. With a snap of his fingers, he commanded Sander to drop a single bead of her blood. In an instant, Sados vanished from the room where he'd been sharing space with Eugene and reappeared in front of Sander. Peeling back the crimson veil of his summoning portal, the first words out of his mouth were, "Where is Cirrus?" Sander immediately dropped to her knees, trembling. "Lord Sados, forgive me. I lost him." "You lost him?" His tone grew icy, his red eyes narrowing. "If I don't take my heart back from him, I'll be powerless again tonight." Just as he raised his hand to punish Sander, Sados froze. A familiar energy surged in the distant system energy. Without another word, he turned and flew toward it, leaving a bewildered Sander behind. Meanwhile, I had just finished defeating and capturing Kana, the spider beast girl. Using the system's placement feature, I sent her back to my house. Elsewhere, Eugene, still sipping her toilet cleaner cocktail, suddenly felt something hit her head. Looking down, she saw a spider, but before I could catch my breath, Sados had already tracked me down. Without warning, he slammed me to the ground. "Didn't you promise to save me, brave one?" he hissed, his face close to mine, running away halfway through. That's disappointing. At that moment, it was crystal clear. This guy was definitely a man. And worse, a beast. But Sados wasn't here to fight. He was here to make me fulfill my promise. "Like hell I will," I shouted, struggling under his grip. Sados tilted his head, his expression shifting to something playful. With a snap of his fingers, he changed into a sleek black outfit complete with cat ears. "Meow. What about now?" he asked with a teasing grin. "No matter how you change," I reply, glaring at him. "I'll never be interested." Sados pouted. "What a shame," he sighed. Then, without warning, he grabbed my right hand and bent it backward, his smile returning. "I thought you humans liked this kind of thing. Cat ears, black stockings, aren't these your favorites? You're making me sad, brave one. I guess I'll have to be more assertive." His grin widened as he brought my fingers toward his mouth. "Don't you dare lick me," I screamed, finally managing to wrench myself free and leap back. But Sados just smirked. "You taste amazing," he said, licking his lips. "So sweet, so pure." He raised his hand, and with a casual flick, I was slammed to the ground by an invisible force, hovering above me. Sados declared, "No matter how hard you try, you won't escape." It was true. Sados had maxed out all his stats through the system. "Why not lock onto me with your system?" he taunted. "It'll help you keep up." "Not happening," I growled, locking onto a guy. "That's where I draw the line as a brave one." Hearing this, Sados laughed. "You're stubborn, I'll give you that," he said. Then, with a predatory glint in his eye, he swooped down. His hand shot out, grabbing something critical. "Let me show you what real happiness feels like," he purred. "If getting the demon god's blood means being with you," I spat, "then I'd rather let my body rot." But no matter how much I resisted, Sados was determined to reclaim his heart. "If you won't cooperate willingly, then I'll just have to educate you." He began channeling energy into his palm. Grinning maliciously, "My heart, my power, my system," he whispered. "It's time for you to come back to your master." But just as Sados was about to complete the spell, the energy in his hand fizzled out. "What?" he muttered, his grin fading into confusion. "Why isn't it working?" A cold, robotic voice echoed from the air. "System transfer denied. All attacks on this user will be nullified." Meanwhile, the system offered me a deal. "Would you trade half your remaining lifespan for one chance to lock onto Sados? If you agree, you'll trigger Sados' Spear of Oblivion. Afterward, Sados will be completely absorbed by you, curing your poison." I couldn't believe it. The system was so desperate to avoid returning to Sados that it was willing to go this far. All I needed was to catch sight of Sados within 10 meters, and I could lock him down. Of course, Sados knew this. With a snap of his fingers, he summoned a thick red smoke, shrouding the entire area. The haze was so dense I couldn't even open my eyes, let alone see to lock onto him. Hidden in the smoke, Sados slashed his palm, blood dripping freely. At the same moment, Sander's hand also began to bleed, the crimson droplets pooling on the ground. With a low rumble, a blood-red door appeared behind her. Sados stepped through, muttering to himself, "That was close. Almost didn't make it out alive. Curse that system betraying me for some random nobody. Great, now my position is probably marked." Sure enough, the system marked his location for me. How the hell did he manage to run that far in an instant? I grumbled. Just then, Charlton's secretary, Dice, knocked on the door. He had something urgent to report to Vice President Charlton. He tossed a warrant on the table, and to my surprise, I was the one being arrested. I was charged with desertion and sentenced to death. The document stated that I had disobeyed orders in Harris's team, fled on my own, and caused the mission to fail. Charlton was caught off guard, clearly finding the situation tricky, but I told him I didn't need his help since I hadn't run away at all. In fact, I was the one who took down the dungeon boss, that old geezer. However, Dice didn't buy it. He said it was impossible, because after the team withdrew, only I, Belle, and Tyrone remained, and we were all only at B rank. How could we possibly defeat an S-rank boss like Noctis? I told him, if you don't believe me, you can go check out Noctis's dungeon yourself. Dice replied that someone was already sent to verify the situation, and in the meantime, I had to be locked up to prevent me from fleeing. Charlton, however, thought that wasn't necessary. He said that while the investigation was going on, I could just be monitored by him, but then Dice reminded us that we needed to attend the reward banquet tonight. Charlton said he'd take me with him. After all, I had never attended a guild banquet before. In the end, the two of them left first, saying they'd come back to pick me up later. I opened the system to check Sados's location. Once I had everything sorted, I would head straight to find her. But according to the system, Sados was closer than I thought. Wasn't she supposed to be outside the city? Wait a minute, her location was right next to me. This idiot had gone to my house. I instantly didn't even bother with my shoes. Just ran straight home. However, when I got back to my house, the living room was completely empty, except for Connell, the round-shaped spider. I checked the kitchen, but there was nothing there either. Not even Eugene, who loved hanging around the bathroom. Could it be that Eugene had been captured by Sados? At the same time, Eugene had just opened his eyes. Seeing that both his hands and feet were bound, he panicked and asked, "Where am I?" Beside him, the transformed Sados gave an answer. "This is the auction hall for beasts and humans." Meanwhile, when I found out Sados's location, I started heading straight for it. After chasing for 2.5 hours, her location suddenly disappeared. Then, I was ambushed by someone hiding in a corner. It turned out I had entered the territory of the Starry Knights. No matter if you were a beast or a hero, they would kill you on sight. The Starry Knights were actually a group of bandits. They thought I was a hero sent to wipe them out. Then, they connected the dots with the imprisoned female beast and the woman, and concluded they were used as bait to reveal their location. This made them panic, thinking other heroes might be lying in wait nearby. So they decided to capture me and interrogate me first. Hearing all this, I figured the female beast must be Eugene. But I was still wondering if that perverted male beast was around. Just then, the system notifying me. The weapon retrieval task would begin in 2 minutes. Once the task started, my stats would drop back to F rank. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Eugene was trying to find a way to escape. Having not been nourished by a male recently, her body had grown too weak. As a Linwolf lizard, she relied on nails to survive. She had recently found a strong human and didn't want to return to her cave. Just as she was sighing about how good that Polet cleaner tasted, the wall of the dungeon suddenly burst open from the outside. It was me. I'd taken care of all the bandits within 2 minutes, and knocked the guy out to get the key from him. The next second, the weapon retrieval timer started. The task: hit someone's butt 10 times until they make a sound. If no sound is made, the player will be immobilized. The countdown was set for 1 hour. In a panic, I grabbed the bandit I knocked out. Hey, buddy, wake up. Can you still make a sound? Seeing me ignoring the 2 hostages, the woman shouted, "Hero, please save me," but I had already lost my system powers. I was just an F-rank hero now. I still needed to complete the task to regain my power. So I decided to rescue Eugene first. "Sorry about that," I said, then slapped her huge butt. Eugene was stunned and let out a small, confused sound. "Master, what are you doing?" The system notified me that I had completed task 1/10. I turned my attention to the unfamiliar woman. Before I did anything, I informed her that I'd need to hit her butt too, but in Sados's eyes, it looked like I was just trying to take advantage of her. She put her foot up and asked me to help undo her chains. "If you can get me out of here, I'll offer myself to you." Once I got confirmation, I unlocked her shackles. The next second, the woman immediately threw herself into my arms. "Hero, I was kidnapped and brought here. They were going to sell me to the Goblin tribe. But now you've saved me, I'm yours." But I didn't have time to listen to her words, so I just slapped her on the butt. However, she didn't make a sound, and when I asked her about it, She just laughed and asked if I could do it again. Since she didn't make a sound when slapped, the system immobilized me for 5 minutes. With only 56 minutes left, I collapsed to the ground. Eugene immediately jumped on top of me. She was feeling really weak and needed my blood, seeing I hadn't said anything. And since I didn't refuse, Eugene assumed I had agreed. She bit into my neck and started drinking my blood. At this point, Sados, who was nearby, was furious. "This lizard is shameless," she yelled, taking advantage of me like that when I wasn't looking. But Eugene wasn't about to let Sados interfere. She wrapped her tail around Sados to stop her. Then, Eugene pulled me into her arms, saying, "He's my master, not yours. I was here first." Sados, being just a fragile woman at night, couldn't break free from Eugene's tail. Only when Eugene became focused on drinking my blood did Sados give up on fighting. Sados decided to focus on getting back the system first. She suddenly started nibbling on my ear, wanting to share my body with Eugene. Was this woman even really kidnapped? Why was she voluntarily doing this to me? Outside the room, Sander was blushing deeply. It turned out that she shared the same sensations as Sados. Sados had already lifted my hand, wanting to try something she hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, from Sander's body, a strange sensation began to stir in her chest. On the other side, Sados's hands didn't stop. She urged me to try bending my fingers, putting some strength into it. The strange sensation made Sander let out a sharp cry. Her body began to tingle, goosebumps covering her skin. But just then, Sados got a little too bold. She reached down toward my crotch, right where the system was located. My pupils had instantly contracted. "No, don't touch there." Sander then felt like she was gripping something. That the pressure felt so familiar. It felt like Sados. Sados realized something was wrong too. Her expression, once full of pleasure, suddenly changed. Could it be that I, not paying attention, used the same move? Oh no, my identity's been exposed. Sados immediately called out to Sander, and in an instant, Sander broke through the wall from the other side. Sensing danger, Eugene immediately transformed back to her original form, leaping into my arms, seeking protection. Amid the smoke, Sados whispered to Sander that she'd been exposed, and they needed to get me out of here fast. I couldn't believe it. Sados had turned into a woman to get close to me. Thankfully, I noticed in time, but it was a pity I couldn't use the system's abilities to pursue them. Once the 5-minute immobilization ended, the two of them had already vanished without a trace. Looks like I'll have to be careful around any females that get too close to me at night. I should head home first, and then go to the city's crowded areas to finish my task. The squad leader wanted to arrest me on charges of being a deserter, even though Charlton's secretary stepped in to say that after investigation, the arrest warrant doesn't match the facts, and that it's already in the process of being revoked. But still, the squad leader slapped him across the face, saying that only a rank or higher squad leaders can attend the dinner. "You're the vice president, the secretary is still the president. Ha! If you keep causing trouble, I'll have both of you thrown into the interrogation room." Seeing this, I told the secretary to go get the vice president's authorization and bring the revocation notice to save me. "I'll hold on for 20 minutes here." The secretary replied, "10 minutes will be enough." "All right, I'll make them apologize to you later and give them a good spanking." And so, I was dragged into the interrogation room. At this point, the countdown for my weapon return mission had less than 30 minutes left, and I had only completed 1 out of 10 spankings. Harris, raising his injured right hand, asked, "Do you remember how my right hand got injured during the battle with the beast Noctis? You tried to escape and sneak attacked me from behind. If it weren't for me sacrificing my right hand, the entire extermination squad would have been wiped out." Slamming his left palm onto the table, he continued, "Tell me, deserter, do you deserve to die?" I reply, "A person who runs away in the face of the enemy deserves to die, just like an animal." Upon hearing this, Harris became even more furious, because deep down, he knew he was the real deserter, the one responsible for the heavy casualties in the extermination squad. In a fit of rage, unable to get the upper hand verbally, he ordered his subordinates to bring over a hammer. Just when I was ready to endure it, Eugene, from my pocket, suddenly offered to help. She said she had absorbed some blood energy and had regained a bit of magic power, And although it would be enough to handle this human's torture, she warned, but you better make it up to me when we get back home. Meanwhile, Harris had already placed a hammer beside me, telling me to choose a finger to start with. If you don't choose, I'll choose for you. Just then, the door to the interrogation room was suddenly slammed open. A voice shouted, "Captain, this is bad." The vice president's secretary had arrived with my revocation notice. It turns out, even though Harris had raised the hammer high, he could only begrudgingly put it down upon hearing the news. He then took the notice from his subordinate's hand, and to his surprise, my arrest warrant was indeed revoked. Seeing this, people around started whispering, "Could it be that he really knows the vice president? That woman is really the vice president's secretary." Then one of the team members suggested, "Why not just release him? It's illegal to torture him after the revocation notice has been delivered." But Harris, surprisingly, shoved the notice back into the subordinate's hands and said, "I still don't know anything about this. Bring it back in half an hour, and I'll explain it to you then." With that, he picked up the hammer again, saying that today, I would definitely have to pay the price. Meanwhile, the team member holding the revocation notice stepped outside and blocked the vice president's secretary, claiming he didn't have the authority to let her in. Unable to stop Harris, his beastly instincts kicked in, and with a mighty swing, he smashed the hammer down on my palm. But when he lifted the hammer off, he found that, despite the brutal blow, I wasn't injured at all. What was going on? No fractures, no blood, not even a scratch on my skin. Outside, though the vice president's secretary had been stopped due to the authority issue, Charlton, the vice president, finally arrived. Nobody dared block him as he kicked the door open. Harris, holding the hammer, was stunned when he saw Charlton. "Vice President, what brings you here?" Charlton pulled out the revocation notice and glared at Harris. "This is my revocation order for the arrest. Let him go." Harris, looking defeated, dropped the hammer and unlocked the handcuffs that bound me. Then, Charlton declared Harris's crimes to the crowd. As the captain, using his power to privately torture his subordinates, "If we pursue this, at the very least, you'll lose your captain position." Harris, gritting his teeth, claimed he hadn't seen the revocation notice. He tried to argue that his teammates could vouch for him. But at that moment, his teammates didn't dare speak up. They didn't want to offend the vice president for Harris's sake. Their silence confirmed Harris's abuse of power. Realizing he had no way out, Harris decided to ask his brother for help. But just then, I stepped forward. "I can testify he didn't see the revocation notice earlier. I won't pursue the arrest, but you'll need to apologize to the secretary." At that moment, my weapon return task had only 1 minute left. The guys who had thrown me into the interrogation room were now all lined up, bowing to the secretary, begging for forgiveness. Little did they know, I was holding a long staff aimed at their butts to make them pay for treating such a beautiful secretary so rudely. "You really had no manners treating such a lovely secretary like that." Hearing the slaps and their yelps, the secretary blushed, and a smile slowly crept onto her face. After completing the task, I casually tossed the staff aside. "Now, you and the secretary are done. Next, it's just you and me." After what you did with the hammer to my hand, I returned my system powers and lightly twisted Harris's arm. He screamed and begged, "I'm sorry. Please forgive me." But I ignored him, snapping his good arm and walking toward Charlton. "Now, I've forgiven you." Charlton didn't say a word, but told me to follow Dice to the banquet. He had to go greet the Holy Church's emissaries first. The Holy Church, formed to eradicate all evil thoughts, had unparalleled purification magic, though they could rid the body of toxins. They were actually dependent on their magic. To truly eradicate evil thoughts, they needed to fully understand them. Today, the Holy Church's saintess arrived at the banquet, drawing the attention of the captains who were attending. They whispered about whether her outfit was too revealing, but their gossip was overheard by the saintess. She stopped, scanned the room, and began to explain. "Our teachings aim to eliminate all evil thoughts in the world. To do this, we must fully understand these evil thoughts. That's why we dress like this. Stop looking at us with your filthy eyes." Charlton immediately singled out 2 of the loudest whispers and ordered, "Someone, slap these 2 perverts 10 times. However, the saintess stopped them saying, "There's no need for that. If that's the case, then everyone here should be punished. Except for Vice President Charlton, he's different, though I can see his inner turmoil. His body remains unaffected. Unlike the rest of you, whose reactions are much stronger, your evil thoughts grow wild." Charlton, scratching his head, boasted, "I have strong self-control. My mind is pure." Little did he know, everyone had already guessed the rumors about his impotence were true. Meanwhile, Charlton's secretary, Miss Dice, led me to the banquet hall for the comforting event. On the way, I asked her if the Holy Church's purification magic was really that powerful. Dice explained that it was a unique magic the church possessed, able to heal anything from severed limbs and illness to deadly poisons. As brave as we adventurers are, we are high-risk jobs in that regard. But no matter which guild, from any region, tried to collaborate, the Holy Church would always refuse. They never let others use their magic. Their reasoning, impurity of heart. It seemed that the poison in me could also be cleansed. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to try it with them. After confirming our identities, we entered the hall. But the first thing that caught my attention was that everyone was gathered around something strange. The Vice President explained, "DeSantis is conducting a test. If she passes, we'll cooperate with you. If that happens, our Sea-Region Adventurer Guild will grow significantly stronger." What they were using for the test was the Holy Church's treasure, the Holy Heart Lotus. Once inside, a gem would display the impurity level of your heart. Whether or not we'd cooperate depended on how pure your heart was. None of the adventurer guilds from other regions passed the test. The crowd was puzzled by the news. What exactly was inside? And how could your purity be tested? The Saintess didn't answer the questions. She only smiled and said, "If you want to know, go in and try it for yourselves." Then, Logan, the leader of the 7th team, stepped forward. He was confident in his pure nature, saying he had never done anything wrong. With full self-assurance, he pulled aside the Holy Heart Lotus curtain and entered. The next moment, everyone heard him screaming in shock. Inside the Holy Heart Lotus, there was a cat girl. Her exaggerated curves were his weak spot. The cat girl, holding a piece of clothing in her mouth, noticed a human adventurer had entered, and immediately crawled towards Logan, teasing him to admire her closely. Logan swallowed nervously. He hadn't expected this. Then, the cat girl meowed, and the thing in her mouth fell out. The overwhelming sight made Logan's nose bleed. With his hands outstretched, he wanted to touch the little kitty. But in a daze, all Logan could think about was the magnificent sight in front of him. Before he could act on his thoughts, the cat girl shoved her finger in his mouth. "Don't say anything else." Next, she looked at him with the most disgusted expression. And, with a snarl, she slapped Logan out of the tent. The Holy Heart Lotus gave Logan's impurity level a whopping 88%. "Seems like a dirty-minded guy," DeSantis remarked. Next up was Owen, the leader of the 6th team. He boasted that he could handle whatever was inside, but the next second, Owen was thrown out, nose bleeding, after being hit by something inside. One after another, every adventurer who entered the Holy Heart Lotus received impurity scores above 80%. DeSantis was getting fed up, feeling like she was just wasting her time. It seemed that everyone in the room had an impure heart and couldn't pass the test. At this moment, I was the only one who hadn't participated in the test. And I finally stepped forward. As soon as I lifted the curtain of the Holy Heart Lotus, I found myself a little mesmerized. Seeing this, the cat girl immediately pulled me into her large chest. Then, with a soft voice, she purred, "Would you like to try?" But before she could finish, I pushed her head down and shoved her back forcefully. Another woman coming at me on her own. I had to stay alert. This could very well be Sados in disguise. The cat girl, who was pushed back, was stunned. This was the first time she'd been actively rejected by a man. At the same time, the Saintess outside was shocked. This was the first time she'd seen someone with 0% impurity. There was actually someone whose heart was as still as water. Meanwhile, inside the Holy Heart Lotus, I was on high alert until I knew her true identity. I couldn't afford to make a mistake, so I activated the system. The cat girl, who'd been rejected by a man for the first time, was confused. This guy had been staring at her chest the whole time. But why did he have no impure thoughts at all? Even his gaze had a hint of hostility. This was more irritating than all the guys who just lusted after her body. because this was a direct denial of her ability to tempt. So, the cat girl became even more seductive, determined to make him feel something, anything. That the reason I was hostile towards her was simple. Not long ago, I'd been tricked by a woman disguised as a demon god. Now, I only had one shot at Sados's fatal strike, a spear that could extinguish him. But if I got it wrong, I was dead. So, as the cat girl got closer, I waited for the right moment to check for male traits. To ease my hostility, the cat girl shook her body and ran toward me, hoping to give me a warm and soft hug to break the ice. Facing me incoming to massive chests, I couldn't afford to let them hit me. With a quick slide tackle, I dodged her. However, the cat girl thought I was just shy, so she turned and charged again. Come feel my softness, just one touch. I guarantee you'll feel a storm in your heart, propped up on my arms. I thought this angle was perfect. If I slid under her, I'd be able to see if there was anything extra down there. Though, as I expected, I slid smoothly under her, but my eyes were firmly locked on her enormous chest. Even though I could have glanced down to see under her skirt, I couldn't help but keep staring at that majestic chest. At the same time, the cat girl realized that even though I was dodging her advances, I still couldn't take my eyes off her. Well, her assets. This discovery made the cat girl even more confused. It shattered her plan to make me feel warm and soft. As for me, I was dripping blood from my nose and feeling really frustrated. Had I missed my best chance to figure out if she was Sados? Looking back at the cat girl, she seemed a bit dazed after what she had just discovered. Why do you look at me like the others? Your body reacts. But there's not even a trace of dirty thoughts. How are you so calm? What's the deal? She shouted, waiting for my answer. So, I spoke up to clear her confusion. Because I'm a decent person, even though my eyes haven't left your assets. I don't have any nasty thoughts about your body. When we were born, it was women like you who gave us milk and nourishment, so we could grow and survive. I've always felt grateful, which is why I keep my eyes on your chest. Upon hearing this, the cat girl's face instantly turned red. She couldn't help but think, so he's that kind of guy. It was a moment of realization, the difference in mindset. At that moment, she felt small, like she was standing at the feet of a giant. She sighed in defeat, then told me I could leave the test. I hadn't expected her to invite me to leave. That confirmed she wasn't Sados in disguise. So, I waved her off and made my way out, ready to get rid of the poisonous blood rain that had been plaguing me. When I walked out of the Holy Heart Lotus, everyone gasped in shock. They didn't expect my impurity value to be 0. Meanwhile, the cat girl inside the Heart Lotus was now doubting herself. Could it be that her own cultivation wasn't enough? The other adventurers weren't worried about me. They either doubted my preferences or thought the crystal was broken. That the saintess from the Holy Church spoke up, saying this was the first time she had seen someone with such pure, unblemished thoughts. Then, I mentioned I had passed the test, and asked if they could use purification magic on me. For someone with such a pure heart, the saintess didn't refuse. Instead, she ordered everyone to leave the room. Then, she sat down on a chair, pointing to the space beneath her and asked me to lie down. Following her instructions, I lay down and asked, "What now?" But the saintess simply told me not to move. Our purification magic is a gift from the church, and each person has a different spot to cast it from. With that, she pulled her black silk feet out of her high heels. It turns out that her purification magic is on the soles of her feet. She needs to keep stepping on the patients in order to perform it. I'm coming. The Holy Virgin of the Church is going to use her feet to perform purification magic. To purify the toxins in my body, I'd like to warn you first. Don't have any evil thoughts during the process. Otherwise, the purification magic will gradually become ineffective. As for the Holy Virgin, the moment she joined the Holy Order, the lust in her body had already been drained away. First, she told me to relax. She had to walk all over my body from top to bottom, in order to understand my physical condition so that she could treat my body more accurately. Then she moved back and forth on my mutilated left hand. In order to facilitate the Virgin's treatment, I took the initiative to open my hand. But I was told not to move, let her do it herself, or it would interfere with her magic. But the chair was too small. It was a little hard to balance even with 2 hands. So she put one of her feet directly on my face, and then focused on the other foot to do her healing magic. After turning over my left hand completely, she's going to start purify the toxins with her magic. This time, it's not gentle, but a heavy stomp on the unused foot, and it made me close my eyes. When I opened my eyes again, I realized I was naked, and I was floating in a patch of water that I couldn't see the edge of. At that moment, a huge black silk foot suddenly descended from above, as if it wanted to crush me underwater. At the same time, it caused the surface of the water to swell up. In order to prevent myself from drowning, I could only fight back desperately. Finally, I pushed the foot away with all my strength. In reality, I also pushed the Virgin's foot away. So the Virgin told me to relax, don't resist. She was healing my body through purification magic. She projected my consciousness into a part of my body. Once she got me out of the water, then my fingers would be restored. So I stopped resisting the Virgin's black silk feet. I let her hold me in place so that I could get out of the water. But just as the Virgin was about to pull me out with one breath, there were grasses under the surface of the water. They didn't want to let me go. These plants were growing in abundance, are essentially toxins in my body. They were like gangrene. They're wrapped tightly around me, almost pulled me off my feet. I couldn't hold on to the smooth black silk, so I bit into the stocking. The only way to tear the stocking and let the Virgin show her toes, so she could hold me firmly with the gap between her toes. Even though I was being pinched by her, I didn't feel any pain. On the contrary, I felt very comfortable. A warm feeling came to my fingers. In the end, the black silk foot managed to save me from the water. After that, the melted thumb was also restored. But the saint realized that there was still a limb inside my body. She did the same thing again. She purified and restored my little toe as well. Until now, all my limbs have been repaired. Now the Virgin is going in a different direction. She's found the location of my poison. She just needs me to work with her to cure the poison. Then she lifted her black feet, successfully clamped on the poison part of my body. But this time, I had to dive underwater by myself. Successfully pulled the poison out of the water. That's the cure. But now there is a key problem. I can't breathe underwater. The Virgin said don't panic. You'll be fine if you're wrapped up like this. I'll help you expel the toxin. At the same time, I'll help you build up your strength. Originally, my consciousness was only the size of a toe. After being wrapped by the jade feet, it instantly expanded several times. So the Virgin let me go. She let me go to eliminate the toxins alone. It was then that I realized how thick the water plants were under the water, and they were rooted here as if they were inside me. To restore my health, I dove straight to the bottom. But the Virgin's body suddenly had a strange feeling. Then, my ears heard the system sound has locked the target. The agitation value is 1%. Restless. The Virgin was actually on her way to use purification magic. Her heart was stirred up and she had evil thoughts. The original purification magic was proceeding in an orderly manner. Successfully restored my mutilated. My limbs were completely repaired. When I was about to finish the exorcism, there was an accident. The Virgin brought my consciousness to the source of the poison. But I was entangled and pushed away underwater. I couldn't get closer. The water here is actually a manifestation of my consciousness. The Virgin needs to use second-order purification magic underwater to shield my body, to break through the toxins. Perhaps it will resonate with my own magic. Suffocating in my entanglements, I urge the Virgin to hurry. So the Virgin wraps her feet around me, ready to apply the shield. But just then, she felt a strange sensation in her body. She was locked by the system and her agitation level reached 1%. With the Virgin's second-order purification magic, the toxins around my body slowly tore apart. Then a shield was created, cutting off the water and the toxins. Now I can try to swim further downstream. The toxins begin to dissipate as soon as they make contact with the shield. At this rate, I'll soon be close to the toxin itself. But even though I've swum farther downstream, I'm still not close to the toxin. The Virgin explained that it looked close. But in reality, it's very far away. You can't judge the distance of consciousness by the distance of reality. To maintain the shield, you have to keep rubbing it. It's exhausting, but there's a joy that passes through the solace of the feet. The Virgin's joy caused her to reduce the intensity of her rubbing. So much so, that the shield failed to hold and slowly began to crumble. She didn't even realize it until the water came in. I had to warn her that the shield was cracked. At this point, the Virgin's agitation level reached 47%. She finally realized that her purification magic was weakening, but she thought I was having dirty thoughts. She warned me to keep my thoughts to myself, or the purification magic will fail. However, at this moment, I don't have time to think. With my shields down and the toxin wrapped around me, I can barely breathe. The Virgin could only suppress her agitation. She can only suppress the agitation in her heart to repair the shield as soon as possible. Although the agitation level in her body has already exceeded half, but her purification magic must not fail. But in the end, the Virgin failed to rub the shield. My consciousness drowned in the water. I returned to my body. When I looked up, I realized that the Virgin was still rubbing hard. By now, the Virgin's agitation level had reached 85%. She kept saying that she had to repair the shield. In fact, she's already attracted by the good feeling brought by the agitation. For this inexplicable pleasure, she wants to keep stepping on it. So I kept calling out to the Virgin to wake her up. Luckily, I finally managed to wake her up from the pleasure. When my consciousness returned to reality, the Virgin withdrew her foot and knew that her treatment had failed, but she had no idea what had just happened to her. Now her heart is still pounding very fast. That familiar feeling just now must have been an evil thought. It was her evil thoughts that caused the purification magic to fail. This matter concerns the dignity of the Holy See. No one must know about it. The Holy Maiden is going to fix her appearance and leave quickly. So the Virgin told the Holy Synod that it was able to cure me of my poison. This treatment is over. You will have to undergo a long period of treatment. I'll let you know when I find a way to get closer to the toxin itself. And with that, the Virgin hooked her finger into the she had just removed. Then she told me her name was Lilia. I could always find her at the Holy Office. That's all for today. After saying goodbye, she left without looking back. It's true. We can't get rid of the toxin with other people. We still have to find the demon god Sados. After the Virgin left the hall, she leaned against the wall. She dropped her shoes. Then she breathed heavily. She could barely hold her breath. But the strange thing is, I've already lost my lust. Why do I still feel this way? But it's different. After passing the Holy Orders test, the Hero Guild in Zone Z made a deal with her. The Vice President praised me for the successful partnership and even offered to grant me a request. So, of course, I asked to become the captain. That way, I can choose which dungeon to go to. Not that I have much time left, only 49 days to live, so I need to head out at noon to deal with Sados. The Vice President looked a little uneasy. Normally, the promotion process takes longer than that, but then, Dice's secretary steps up and says she can help me speed things up. I know the ropes. We'll get it done by noon. Think of it as a thank you for taking down Harris. I head home to prep for the mission, only to open the door and find a maid waiting for me. Welcome home, Master. It's Eugene, the Beast Girl, dressed as a maid. She proudly announces that she's cleaned up the whole place and even ate all the food. She grabs my arms, looking for praise. Eugene, you're awesome, but, you could have left some food for me. Eugene grins and says, I'm so useful. Master, I can stay here forever, right? I raise an eyebrow. Aren't you going back home? Eugene pauses for a moment, then looks confused. Home, for monsters. It's all about the nest. We don't have homes like humans. As she's talking, she's pinching my cheek. Ouch. I tell her, just don't let anyone find out you're a monster, all right? There could be trouble in the human city. Eugene flashes a confident smile. Don't worry, Master. I'm great at hiding, and guess what? Her affection for me is now at 100%. From now on, any interactions with her will double that affection. As a maid, Eugene's already done her work. Now, it's time for her to collect her reward. You see, back in the dungeon, Eugene took a lot of magic damage blocking those hammer strikes from me. I promised I'd make it up to her double. And now, well, it's time to pay up, but hey, it's a win-win situation, some extra power for me, and Eugene gets her compensation. Meanwhile, Dice is on her way to my house. She's holding the promotion notice in her hand, but little does she know what's happening back home. At that very moment, Eugene is violently ripping off my clothes. Your body is so tiny, Master, it's adorable, she purrs, getting dangerously close. I can't help myself, I just want to devour you. And with that, she sinks her teeth into my chest. beginning to siphon my life force. As she does, Eugene's magic slowly starts to replenish, and my own power steadily grow. But in her excitement, she forgets her own strength. Her big hands grip my small frame so hard it hurts. Bang!